Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. This is Zero X Saigon. We are about to go live for another THORChain weekly live stream. Today we're going to be joined by Chris from GrassRoots Crypto and Chad Barraford, the one Chad to rule them all. I'll give them some time here to trickle in, and then we'll get the show on the road. So thank you everyone for tuning in, and we'll get started in just a moment. Hey, there we go. Chris, good to hear from you, sir.
Sweet.
This is your first space?
Yep.
Nice. What an honor. Great to break your space cherry with you, sir.
Sweet.
We have the Pluto from Nine Realms. Pluto, how are you, sir?
Good. How are you guys?
Doing good. Happy Merry Early Christmas.
You too. You too. Just getting the eggnog machine started.
There you go. Eggnog to the moon. Pleasure to host you. Looks like Gavin might be able to join here in a few minutes as well. And then Chad messaged about 5 minutes ago, said he'd be joining as well. But I think for this one, we'll let Chris kind of host a conversation here and get some updates from you guys on everything that's happening this week and looking forward on the protocol level. Chris, you want to give a quick introduction and lead the rest of the space?
Okay, sure. So I think it's going to be a busy sprint at the end of the year, and just look at the latest dev update. So I think we shipped 0.772. From what I understand, maybe Pluto's StageNet got launched, and the router got upgraded. Is that right?
Yeah, for sure. That's just what happened in the last week or so. We can talk about StageNet, but I see Chad just jumped on. So yeah,
Sweet.
why isn't Chad? Why don't you give an update about kind of like where we're at now and where we're going into the new year?
Hello, everybody. How's everybody doing?
Hey.
Sorry if I sound sniffly or whatever. I've been sick the last few days, so excuse me if I sneeze or what have you. Yeah. So where we're at. So we finally just did the Router 3 upgrade, which was the last step that we wanted to take. That was making some tweaks or improvements from the June or July issues we had. It was like the last thing on the to-do list. Maybe my speakers here. So that whole thing is now over. At least in my mind, that's true. We can now move on. And so we finally did the Router 3 upgrade, which is great. Next step is moving towards just getting back to like a regular churning kind of interval, which I think we're now on today now, which is great. And then the next thing after that is working on StageNet things and getting the network prepared for new chains to be added, like Terra and Luna, which Pluto can talk more about those things later on. The other thing that we're working on is talking about having nodes control Mimir instead of having a Mimir admin. So nodes have like the final say, really, or the highest authority, if you want to call it that. That's one thing we've been talking about. The community been talking about changing the incentives around node operators and should be paid out relative to number of nodes versus number of bond or amounts of bond. That's another thing the community is kind of talking about as a whole. And then after that, another thing people are talking about is allowing a single validator to receive bond from other individuals. They have to whitelist a list of Thor addresses that they want to receive rune from to contribute to their bond of their node. That allows more people to participate in these nodes, and even ones that don't have the technical skill sets to run a big, complicated, DevOps system like a Thor node is. People can, find somebody else. Maybe Nine Realms would be a good example of that, or maybe Bison Trails, or who knows, to run a node on their behalf, and then they provide the rune for themselves on that side of it. So that'll open up some things for the community. It's all being discussed and proposed within the community, and the community that make the decision on how they want to move forward with these things, or if they want to move with them at all. That's up to the community to decide, really. But we're just kind of putting these ideas forward.
Awesome. What do you apart from StageNet and the chains being launched, what do you see coming first with regards to, things around either the control of the mirror or the increase in the bond? What's happening? What would you expect to see coming up next out of those things?
Well, I hope to have. My intention is to have a node-controlled linear to be done in the next version, in version 78, which is being worked on now. So that'll hopefully be released to the community in the next week or so, if everything goes to plan. The whole getting more people to participate from a bond perspective, we'll have the code ready for that, I think, in the next maybe 2 weeks or so. But that requires more time for the community to kind of adopt this new thing, right? Like, you have to build nodes. Even building a node takes like a week in a sense. And so that has a longer tail kind of movement, rather than like no mirrors, which is like should be available pretty quickly. And then the other thing I think we're focusing on in January, at least, and maybe Pluto can talk more about this, is getting the synthetic war games going. And so to create a kind of a sandbox environment where the community can play with synthetics and start, messing about with it, get their hands dirty, try to find some, exploits or problems or issues or bugs or whatever, to give us an opportunity to try some chaos before we go to ChaosNet, and start, ripping on that pretty soon.
Awesome. So did you want to give an update of StageNet and how those chain integrations are looking?
Yeah, for sure. So StageNet is up and running now. We have it's permissioned now for different validators, meaning you have to essentially be on a whitelist of validators in order to join StageNet. And so the reason we made that decision is essentially to increase the ability to do two things: to move with quicker velocity, so that we don't have to, wait on different people to adopt new updates, or if we, try to stage, a new pool like Doge, for example, we run into some issues. We can just like cut a new version and quickly roll it out to all the nodes, rather than having to wait for everyone to adopt. So it'll drastically speed up the sort of iterative development cycle on adding new chains. And then the other thing it's going to help us do quicker is diagnose issues. So instead of having to like do a back and forth with different testnet node operators, many of whom, sometimes would just like up and leave the network and just disappear forever because they got some testnet rune, and then they were like, okay, that was cool, I'm done with this experiment, and they disappear. So, we often found these test networks being in like a weird state for that reason. And it was just hard to debug what was going on. So StageNet is up now, 9 rooms, and specifically me are in control of all of those validator nodes. And we've seeded the pools using real BEP2 rune converted to S rune. And so what this means is that those pools have real value. You would actually have to switch real rune to S rune in order to, purchase tokens on the StageNet pools. So very soon we're going to release AsgardX and potentially THORSwap support for StageNet, and so anyone will be able to swap on StageNet, except there's very, very small liquidity pool sizes right now. We only added about $1,000 worth of each L1 to the liquidity pools on StageNet. So I don't know why you'd want to trade in those pools. You get hit with a ton of slippage, but their prices more or less match what the current prices are. And someday somebody might decide that they want to arb those pools. But in the meantime, they're just there. Those pools are just there to essentially act as placeholders, and we can start seeding additional pools for Doge and UST as soon as the chain daemons are spun up for those, and we merge the PRs into Thornode. So I can talk a little bit about kind of what the testing and integration schedule looks like for new chains, but I just want to make sure we've addressed everything about kind of like the mechanics of StageNet and the purpose for StageNet. But do you think that's a good enough explanation of like what StageNet is and why we need it, or are there any other questions about StageNet particulars what do you think? We could hold those to the end. I can keep talking about integrations, or we can go a little deeper into sort of the execution of StageNet and its consequences. But those are mostly like, I guess, lower level issues and that don't affect really the average user. I think everyone that's on this call is just basically wondering when Doge, when Luna. So what do you think? What we could talk more about that, or just get right into the fun stuff?
Maybe just get into the fun stuff. I think just one thing, if people do trade on StageNet, the high slippage would be because they're shallow pools, is what I'm guessing.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
Probably not the best idea.
Yeah, it's probably not the best idea. I mean, I'm someone may decide to do it, but there's really no point in doing it. Although what would be interesting, what I just thought of when Chad brought up the Thor games, if we are testing synths first on StageNet, it would kind of make sense to do it in like shallower pools with more slippage, because it would be easier to simulate a type of event on THORChain where maybe someone like bought up like half the supply of a shallower pool on THORChain, and then like did some type of like mint attack on synths with manipulating the underlying price of the liquidity pool and then like burning synths, or some weird thing that I haven't really thought through, but someone may have thought through already. It'll be actually, StageNet will make it easier to test scenarios like that, because in order to move the price of a pool by, however many % you would to make an attack like that possible, you wouldn't need that much of the L1 asset to do that. So StageNet might actually prove to be a perfect proving ground for something like synths, where we're going to basically put for Thor games real rune bounties, so native rune bounties worth real money on different tiers of exploits. And so if you can like find a way to extract more than 1/100th of the value of the pool in a single transaction using a synth exploit, we'll reward you however many 100 or 1,000 rune. I forget what it is right now, but we will communicate the guidelines for Thor games in advance, and we'll conduct it on StageNet. So when the time comes, we'll add the UI support for StageNet, and then people will just be able to use StageNet to mint and burn synths and also swap in those pools, very small amounts. But that would be, it's an ideal environment in those shallower pools for actually proving some of these economic attacks that are more theoretical and would be harder to actually prove in mainnet.
Awesome. Yeah, I think there's quite a few thousand rune dedicated to bounties, so that'll be when that comes out.
I think like 13 to 16,000. I think we had earmarked for bounties on synths, just for the Thor games.
Yeah, it's no small amount. That's pretty good.
Yeah, so we'll release to the community what those guidelines are and what we're looking for on Thor games, like basically different challenges, and it ranges all the way from like really minor things like just front end or UI issues, just so we can get that buttoned up before they go live. You can earn like maybe a 10 or 100 rune, for one of those, all the way up to like several thousand for those type of P1 vulnerabilities on synths that could be, possibly exploited through manipulating or moving a pool in a large amount in one direction, and then minting or burning a synth, and kind of, if you're able to I don't know, someone will think of something and someone will win the award, and it'll be pretty sweet to see what they do.
Yeah, they did this for single chain Castnet, like bug bounty just before launch with BetSpot. So that was quite good. Really incentivized everyone to get in quickly and first, so you could find the bugs before everyone else, and to do as much testing, because it didn't matter how much testing you did. It's all about how many defects you can find.
Yeah, for sure.
That was really fun. So I guess let's go to the chain integrations. So everyone's wondering when Luna in UST. And then I just wanted to talk about that. And then is Solana on the radar as well, or not?
Yeah, we can talk about Solana first, because that one gets brought up a lot.
The immediate radar, I guess what I'm everything's on the radar. the immediate radar?
So I mean, I actually asked Chad about that. Chad, what do you think in terms of like the underlying? You're closer to that, like the underlying, sort of like cryptography changes that need to be made to support Solana. I think we needed to do those after the router v3 upgrade.
We didn't have to. We kind of wanted to because we wanted to stay focused on kind of button up all the things we wanted to button up before moving on to add more things on top of everything.
Yeah.
Just about being completist and making sure we smooth out all the edges of the current change before we start going all in on new chains. Now, so Solana is a little bit interesting one because it uses a different mechanism for consensus than history. And so that mechanism is very different in terms of how it functions and how it accomplishes what it accomplishes. And so the amount of work that it takes to add Solana is significantly more than it would be for something like Cosmos or Terra, or those things are a lot simpler to implement than Solana is. So they're much more expensive in terms of time it takes to do them. But I'm still bullish on the idea of adding it for sure. It's just that it's more time consuming to implement, than it would be for something else. Like if we wanted to, for example, like if we wanted to add like Binance Smart Chain or Dogecoin or all these other things that are based upon something we've already done, it becomes mostly just like a copy and paste from the current code we already have. Maybe a few tweaks here and there, but predominantly just a copy and paste, and that becomes very simple and easy. So you get to add a lot of value to the network without really doing a whole lot of work, which has a nice kind of payoff in that sense. But Solana is, obviously a great project and something we'll be interested in working on in the coming few months. It's definitely like one of the very few projects in my mind that actually are doing something interesting. Most of them are dog shit, but this one actually is a very solid project with a solid team behind it.
Yeah, and the thing with Solana is, as far as I understand, which is admittedly not that well, I haven't looked at it. My focus has been more on like Cosmos chains, but it does require some changes to like the vaults that we're using, like to secure Asgard. We need to add a new, vault that's secured by a new type of elliptic curve, as I understand it.
Yeah, so what we support today is ECDSA, which is like the most commonly used elliptical curve cryptography out there. That's like kind of the first, what Bitcoin uses and Ethereum uses and most things. But some chains, I think Polkadot's one of them. Anything that's crypto node based, so XMR or Monero, uses this EDDSA. Which is a different implementation of a similar mathematics. And there's actually a lot of benefits. To be honest, EDDSA is actually a better standard than ECDSA. It has a lot of benefits to it. But from our perspective, we don't really care whether it's ECDSA or EDDSA. Like to us, it's like it's just we just use the cryptography that the chain uses. Like we don't have a selection in this regard. We just kind of say, oh, we want to add this chain and it uses EDDSA and so we add support for it. So we already do support EDDSA just to some degree, at least in the core protocol. There's a few things we got to add. Like we need to do it so that when we do a keygen, we have to keygen both an ECDSA and an EDDSA, which we haven't done that work quite yet. But I don't think it's like too difficult or too time consuming. It's pretty straightforward. I'm pretty sure that the TSS code underneath it all already supports EDDSA as well. So I think we're already most of the way there. Just a few things we got to tweak to get support for EDDSA.
Totally. And so from a security perspective, like it's one of the things that we want to be a bit more cautious about and we want to take a bit more time on. We might get, for example, like it's just like we're using a new elliptical curve type. It's changes to underlying crypto things. It's not just like a new Bifrost integration to, read from a new chain. Like it's going to take more care and more effort than, adding Luna, which is literally just like a Cosmos chain, which is by far the simplest and I must say, easiest chain integration that I think has been done yet because it's literally just like Cosmos talking to Cosmos. So it's not as much of an underlying lift compared to something like Solana.
Yeah, and also what makes it so easy is that like you have instant finality, right? So you don't have to worry about like reorgs or anything like this kind of nature. And there's no, at least for Gaia, there are no smart contracts at all. So there's no, concerns about having transactions manipulated by some malicious code or anything like that. And so the attack surface is relatively small on something like Gaia. Even in Terra, it's pretty small. I mean, they still have like Cosm Wasm for Terra, so we have to figure out, make sure we're not interacting with any Cosm Wasm contracts directly, just to have a defensive position. But like those things are relatively easy. But Solana has a whole different mechanism of like how it generates blocks, and I think it even like can skip blocks. Like you can be at block 20 and then like skip to block 25, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So it's a little bit complicated how it works, and you have to make sure that like that you don't get into a split brain scenario where like some people think it's the chain is in this state and some people think the chain is in that state, and then you have this really wacky thing in the middle here, and that can become problematic. So we have to make sure they protect the network from those kinds of funky states that you can get into, and either in a proof of work situation, like on Bitcoin, we do reorgs and this kind of thing, or branching, or in Solana's case, where different validators can have a different state of the world at any given moment, and then they're supposed to work it out on their own, in which sometimes that doesn't work out, and they just halt the chain entirely for like hours on end because they can't figure out, who's right, and all that kind of stuff. But we have to make sure we protect the network from even that kind of scenario where the chain is not really sure what's true and what's false.
Yeah, so definitely a lot more, just unknowns with Solana, and it's going to require some more time. And then there was a Twitter poll recently where people were like, what's going to be after Terra, Luna, Doge, Solana, and it looked like the top voted chain then was Avalanche. So Avalanche, isn't that just like a fork of Ethereum or something? Shouldn't that be pretty easy?
I actually don't know what Avalanche actually is underneath the hood. I never actually looked at it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think it's EVM based. I'm not sure if it's like a fork of Ethereum, but I'm not aware of any issues with Avalanche that would prevent that from taking too much longer.
I mean, if it is EVM based, then we already have an EVM based system, Ethereum, and so it should be relatively simple. But I actually don't know what the underlying technology is of Avalanche. I just never had the spare cycles to actually go look and read about it. I've been too focused on delivering, shipping.
Yeah. So
I believe it's EVM based. I believe it's EVM based. Yeah. Yeah.
So like if that's what the community wants, sure, we can work on that after Solana. So those two aside, yes, what everyone's interested in right now is when Doge, when Luna. Doge is ready to go, more or less. Like I'm planning more or less after this call and over the next couple of days to merge Doge into StageNet, and then when we make our first StageNet swap, Doge for real BTC, real Doge for real BTC on StageNet. That's when we can more or less open up the discussion for community and node operator review, and actually start the run book for spinning up Doge on mainnet. Because again, all that stuff's been ready to go for some time now, and it is a direct copy of Bitcoin. But it's just like it just depends on like whether we can muster the different front end teams and the middleware teams like Exchange.js, AsgardX, THORSwap. All of these are individual teams that are outside of the core developers or Nine Realms' ability to coordinate with. So, as for when will Doge be added to the protocol, the answer to that is very well could be before the end of the year, or very soon after, like first week of Jan. When it will be available in at least one UI to be swapped on by just everyday Joe, the answer largely depends on other teams. So we're obviously helping to coordinate those efforts, and I think that we will have Doge and mainnet sometime between now and the second week of January. And as for Luna, the client is more or less done. I think there's some more stuff I need to do with the signer code, but it's pretty dang simple. It's using you just have a gas asset, like every other Cosmos chain, and the mechanics of it. It's when you're talking about using Cosmos SDK to basically parse a Cosmos transaction and then forward it to Cosmos, like in a format that Cosmos understands. The Bifrost implementation ends up looking pretty dang simple, because like all of the block scanner APIs are already built out. It's just built out as part of the Cosmos SDK. So you're just calling native functions to parse transactions on one Cosmos chain and forward them to another Cosmos chain, aka THORChain. So that one's pretty simple. And then I think it would be good to run through some of the use cases, like to ignore or some of the things that we want, the security cases that we want to do, like ignoring COSM-WASM transactions or any contract calls, not allowing rebasing assets. But there's what we'll probably end up doing is just launch the Terra integration with a whitelist of assets. So probably just like UST and Luna for now. And then if we do that, then we don't have to like think through all of the different use cases for like different assets that might be able to attack the network if they were listed. So I'm very much in favor of when we launch chain integrations to kind of do it with the guardrails on. So potentially cap the Luna or the UST pool at first. Maybe that's not necessary. I don't know, Chad, what your thoughts on that are, but we can definitely do a whitelist of assets and just bring Luna and UST on at first. And one of the questions we've been getting, or that I saw on Twitter, was like, are you guys going to audit this? And that's largely something I would leave up to like the community and people to other than myself to decide. Like I'm just interested in delivering the code for the Bifrost integration and the infrastructure required for node operators. And beyond that, I want to see like node operators make the decision themselves to adopt the different chain infrastructure and to start running the code. I would love if the Mimir value for halting the Terra chain was defaulted to yes, and that node operators actually had to use their newfound node operator Mimir control to unhalt the chain. Like that would be a really cool way of, in a decentralized way, saying like, yes, the node operators are prepared and want this chain online. So when the timing for all of those things takes place, like that's kind of up in the air. But in terms of like shipping Terra to StageNet, doing real Luna swaps with real Bitcoin on StageNet, and then preparing all of the PRs and getting Luna ready to be added into the protocol. We're talking January for that. And then of course it's just a matter of like, do we want to put guardrails on the size of those pools at first? Do we want to put a whitelist on the assets? And how quickly can the different UIs adopt it? But the folks over at THORSwap said that they were ready to add it pretty much as soon as the Exchange.js integration is complete. So, and we got 2 developers working on that right now. So I'm pretty confident that you and I will just be able to swap like BTC for UST on THORChain in mainnet next month.
That's pretty cool.
Hells yeah.
That's pretty cool. Hells yeah. Yeah, everyone wants Luna UST. I think I saw it. It's now the second biggest DeFi chain, so overtaking Binance Smart Chain, and it looks like it's going for Ethereum. So, pretty keen. I do have a question. So, for anyone thinking at home, what is ECDSA and what is EDDSA? So, ECDSA is elliptical curve digital signing algorithm. And the other one is Edwards curve, which is based off Schnorr signatures, from my understanding. So, from what I understand, the Schnorr went as part of Taproot last month. So, Chad, is there? It sounds because Taproot use, from what I understand, they use EDDSA. Would that then need an update within THORChain to take Taproot type signatures or Schnorr signatures specifically? Or what's the plans there? Is it to do nothing? Is it to get it there, or wait for further adoption? I just wanted to get your comments on that.
In terms of like Taproot on Bitcoin support and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, Schnorr signature specifically. Because I know a couple of wallet vendors have come out with it already, but it's not exactly like, mainstream. I mean, SegWit took a while too. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't think we're quite in any kind of rush to implement anything on regards to Taproot, largely because like Taproot doesn't really give you all that much capability over that we already have now, right? It also opens you up to more of a smart contracting like concept within Taproot, which we don't want to expose ourselves into if we can avoid, is to keep things a more secure perspective. That may change in the future, maybe 6 months from now, a year from now, that could also possibly change. But I think right now, that just is too. It's not much value to be pulled from that tree in a sense, at least not from my perspective.
Awesome. There's a lot of talk about Monero and Haven and when they're going to come to THORChain. I know that Monero, there's a lot of work done. I saw some PRs there in Discord. I just wanted to know if there's any developments, any news on that space, anything that the community could want to know, or is it just something that's still down the track?
Yeah, so Monero thus far has probably been the most difficult chain to integrate with because of rig signatures, right? So the network needs to observe that a transaction was sent in order to know that a transaction was sent, right? I guess it makes sense. But because rig signatures make that very difficult or basically impossible to see, that makes the integration into THORChain very difficult. Now, our cryptographer's been working with the Haven team for like on and off for months. And I think there's actually a new fork that some other people, I think they're from South America, they want to fork THORChain and create a new thing that is THORChain plus like Monero. And so they're going to focus on that as like their primary, thing. And then maybe we'll just pull in their changes in a sense. But the problem with Monero, though, probably the hardest thing to deal with, other than the fact that you have to like deal with rig signatures, is that the memo space in XMR and the Monero is 16 bytes. 16 bytes is like nothing. Like Bitcoin's tiny, and Bitcoin's got 80. And so you don't have enough space in that 16 bytes to be able to say, oh, I want to swap my Monero for Ethereum, and here's my OX address, and blah, blah, blah. Here's my slip limit, all these kind of things. That's hard to do and not really practical to do within Monero. That creates a significant problem for us. And we've talked to the team behind the Monero protocol that asked them, like, let's expand that from 16 bytes to something more reasonable. And they've always kind of pushed pretty hard back on that notion. So in order to make it practical, we have to create another mechanism within THORChain where you have to like create a swap intent, receipt. And then you have a 16-byte reference code to that, to that receipt of saying, oh, I want up to Bitcoin. I want, a swap limit of this, and I want my BC1 address to be that, blah, 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 blah. So you get that little receipt that kind of represents the 16-byte code that represents that receipt. And then you can, when you make the swap, you put a little receipt in there, and then the network can look it up in its own internal storage and, you want to swap to Bitcoin, and here's the BC1 address, and blah, 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 all the information we need to know. So, but that creates like another problem of like, okay, now you need to have, transact on THORChain itself to create a little receipt, which means you have to have a Thor wallet and you have to have Rune to do so, which is something we've always tried to avoid doing, not force people to carry or to buy Rune in order to swap on the network. But because of the limitations of Monero, we might have to go back on that for this particular chain at least, go back on that. But that's a very difficult problem to solve downstream. Probably something we'll do, in 2022.
And TNS doesn't assist that with the alias?
No, it does, but the problem is even if with TNS, you have, say you want to swap to BDC.BDC, so you're already, you're already like 7 characters in halfway through, and then you have a colon, and then you have, a TNS name, which maybe is 5 characters, and you're already, I mean, that could work if you happen to have a TNS that's small enough, possibly, but then you won't have space for like a swap limit. I want to make sure I get at least X amount of Bitcoin. It's even with TNS, it's very difficult. It works fine if you're trying to do like Bitcoin, because Bitcoin has 80 bytes in its memo field that it can support, and that makes it possible to swap to Monero, because even Monero is its address size is 97 bytes, I think. Like the actual Monero crypto node address is 97 bytes. So if you have that address, and then you have a Thor address for the affiliate fees, and then the basis points for the affiliate fees, it's a lot of data to push into one little memo that you have a limitation of 80 bytes on. Let alone 16 is even more kind of it becomes completely impractical to work with. So we have to go through other mechanisms to figure out a way to support something like that. But then again, we can support something like Zcash relatively easy, because it is effectively a Bitcoin fork to some degree. And you can do just, instead of using Z addresses, use T addresses, right? And that kind of makes all this thing easier, and it's got larger memo fields that it can support. So that one's a lot easier to interface with and to interact with if people want to have a privacy-based asset on the network. Monero is still something that we're interested in, but it's just very, very tricky to get it to work properly.
And what about Haven?
Yeah, I think Haven is kind of in the same boat. I'm not sure what the memo size limitations on Haven off the top of my head. But part of the problem with Haven, though, is that because the monetary value of their block size, or the block reward, excuse me, is so small, if you were to swap $1,000, the number of blocks the network has to wait in order for it to, wait enough confirmations that it can trade based on this information is pretty high. And so the thing I'm concerned about with Haven is that it may not be the most practical interface, because it would just take so long just to do a $5,000 trade.
That's the required confirmations, which is based off the block reward. Yeah.
Yeah. We do a different system. So the original idea of where it says with Bitcoin, if you wait 6 confs and that's what Bitcoin is, that was from a research article in 2012 by this guy named something Goldfeld, I think his name was. I can't remember the guy's name. He wrote this research article back in 2012 where he talks about confirmations and how many you have to wait, blah, blah, blah. And even in the article, the way he phrases it, it's just 6 is a good number, I guess. It's the way he phrases it doesn't sound very definitive. It's something like this. But then as the hash rate improves over time, since it, the hash rate today is I don't even know how many millionfold it is over 2012. There's actually a Bitcoin miner today that you can buy that is equal to the entire hash rate of Bitcoin back in 2013. A single miner, ASIC miner you can buy. That's how much we've moved, in Bitcoin mining. So the whole 6 confirmations thing was wasn't really based on any kind of logic or reasoning or mathematics or economics. It was just this is a good number. Yeah, okay, right. And which is not really a great way of thinking about it when we're talking about building an autonomous network that has to be resistant to whales trying to fuck with it and steal funds and stuff. So we have to take a much more definitive and mathematical approach to how we defend this network from reorgs and double spend attacks and this kind of thing.
Yeah, that's what I meant. You've got the confirmation counting, which is based, I think, the ceiling of the transaction value over the block reward you get. So if you're doing a 1 BDC in, you just need 1 confirmation required. If you're doing a 20 BDC in, it's going to be quite a long time. That's what I meant. Yeah.
Right. So, and so for Haven, that's a little bit more tricky, because in Haven's case, the block reward is I think it's $30 or something like this. It's not a huge quantity monetary value to it, and so the number of blocks you have to wait is significantly higher on Haven than it would be for BDC or ETH or something that's more established and has a higher market cap to it.
All right, sweet. I did see. What is the doo-doo pool going to zero? There's even a PR on that. I didn't. I don't know what this one is. So maybe you can
Yeah.
explain what this is.
Yeah, so this is what happened. It's kind of I found it to be kind of fascinating. So there were in the Dodo pool there were like I think there was like 5 or 6 LPs in the pool, right? And one of those LPs had like 99.8% of the liquidity of the pool. Like it had almost basically the entire thing or very close to it, right? And so what ended up happening was this individual decided to withdraw 100% of their value from the network, which caused the network to send out basically almost all of its Dodo, or this vast majority of it, and it had to do that through every wallet in the entire system because it was just spread out across multiple Asgards, multiple Yggdrasil vaults. So in the end, I think it sent out it was like 48 transactions on Ethereum to get it to send out all the liquidity. So then what happened was kind of funny was that because we basically spam the fuck like DDoS Ethereum sort of, right? And we put up so many transactions on Ethereum that we couldn't satisfy it in one block space, which means that some of the transactions were successful and some of the transactions failed. So then the network because the Yggdrasil, some of them failed, it rescheduled back to Asgard, but Asgard didn't have all the funds it needed, so then it basically got stuck there. But then to make things even more interesting and worse, is that because the gas used to send out all those 48 transactions was like something like $13,000 in gas fees, just because it's so many transactions happening all at the same time, that the remaining rune in the pool was less than the value of the gas used to send out all those transactions. So it ended up causing that because when you send out those, the Dodo or whatever, you have to swap. Basically, the network swaps to rune, puts the rune into the reserve to pay for the gas later once the gas is actually observed. But because it wasn't enough rune to actually cover all of the gas, the rune basically went down to zero for that pool, which means that you could not add liquidity, withdraw liquidity, or swap liquidity until somebody just donated some rune to the pool just to kind of get a non-zero number, and everything was kind of fine in that regard. So it was really interesting kind of extreme scenario of oh, hey, there's a massive pool, in which case only one person has any real value in it, and then they just withdraw, which causes but not 100%. If it was 100%, it would have been fine. It would have been a whole different kind of code execution path. But it wasn't 100%. It was 99.8 or whatever the hell the number was. And so that kind of created this interesting kind of failure case in this kind of edge scenario.
Right. So it's not just a deep pool. It's a deep distributed owner pool is what's required here.
Yeah, but there's also some improvements we can make around the protocol itself to be more resilient against these kind of crazy scenarios, which I think we're going to be working on that sometime relatively soon. But it's been a big problem that I'm all that really concerned about or thinking all that much about, because it's such a weird scenario to begin with, and it doesn't really cause any real issues. It just an annoyance. We just got to kind of patch a little bit.
Oh, that's awesome. That is cool. So I think in the last couple of weeks, there was a responsible disclosure for a TSS vulnerability to do with, I think, exposing the key for a TSS. So for people that don't know, Asgard Vault is a TSS vault. So it gets created through a key generation, and then when funds move out, it's through a key signing process. And there's a vulnerability discovered in both the original implementation and then the updated, this is the GG18 and 20 implementation for TSS. And then that was responsibly disclosed, and a bounty of $500,000 was paid by THORChain. So maybe can you just talk through that TSS vulnerability, Chad? And I know it got fixed, but maybe just have a chat about that, any implications, and anything else you can add about that there. That'd be good.
Yeah, so this was a month or two ago. I remember because I was actually walking around Edinburgh with my wife at the time, and this guy had messaged me. It's like, hey, I have this exploit, and and threshold signatures. I'm like, oh, okay. And so we started kind of chatting a little bit about the bug, and then it quickly went way over my head because I'm not a cryptographer myself. I'm an engineer. So this threshold signature stuff is definitely way over my my technical expertise. And so I connected him with our cryptographer to help them kind of start chatting through the issue and all these kind of things. So basically, the crux of it, without getting too technical or complex in the description, is there's a way that you could generate a key gen in which you could force other people to expose their private key to you, sort of. And so it makes sure that in a situation where the network is doing a key gen, there was a possibility that somebody could have exposed basically the private key by being able to brute force, reducing the guess space to be able to brute force what the other keys are going to be by reducing one of your variables in your TSS share. That's probably as technical as I can probably take it. But so this person came forward. I think they were part of the original team, if I'm not mistaken, that helped design and build threshold signatures. At least the first implementation was written, I think it was Rust, I want to say. They came forward to us, and then we went to other teams as well because it was a problem in the Binance library itself, not so much in the THORChain code that we've written, but a problem in the underlying library that we imported into our system that a bunch of other teams participated in, and that use that library as well. And so we actually created a new Telegram group of just like threshold signature, kind of like a security team, if you want to call it that, where we have quick access to the heads of all the different threshold signature projects in the space, so that we could responsibly disclose to them about this vulnerability, and they can before we expose anything publicly to ourselves, we want to give those teams access to that bug as well, and to be able to mitigate any issues they may have and all that kind of stuff. So this is really like about the hardening process of threshold signatures itself, right? Because that's its own bit of code that's been audited and all these things, and built by Binance, audited by Binance. They hired an external team, which I'm blanking on the name of that team that audited that code off the top of my head. And so that was a bug that was discovered, and we were exposed to it as well. But that's why we paused churning, because as soon as we learned that this was a problem where you could, during a keygen process, to reveal the private key, we just basically paused churning entirely. So you couldn't, if you were to learn about it now, you wouldn't be able to expose it because you would need to do a keygen to do it. And we just disable keygens entirely in the network just until we have a core issue resolved. And so, so once this guy came forward, we talked to the other teams as well, other projects that were using threshold signatures, to figure out, okay, well, we should pay this guy some money just to further incentivize him and other people in his community to continue to hack on threshold signatures, look for exploits and problems and bugs, which we did pay him out. I think, I'm not sure how much of the treasury we paid out. I think the vast majority was us, because technically we have the most at risk, to be fair. So we were the first ones to use threshold signatures. Or maybe Ren was, but they're doing like a kind of a hybrid version of it. But we have a lot of liquidity at stake, and so we decided to pay out from our own treasury the vast majority of all those funds to that individual. And so he got paid out, and he's continuing to work, and he's going to look for more, bugs and exploits and that stuff, just to make sure that if there's anything more, he'll let us know.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Big win all around.
Yeah, and then there was another threshold signature exploit, that same Binance library again. We weren't exposed to this particular one because we have additional validation checks that we put on our code. So for us, we were fine. For other projects, they were not. They had to deal with that themselves. But again, it's all about threshold signatures having an implementation that's being kind of that's being baked. It's just being cooked. That's being given time for a lot of eyes. And the more money we put behind the project around threshold signatures, that 500,000 we paid to this guy named Omar, the more money we put behind it, actual dollars, the more eyes are going to look at it, and that's going to just help that code base become hardened and secure, just because we get as many eyes as possible from very smart and brilliant people who are a lot more intelligent, brighter than I am, for sure. who are looking at that stuff and looking for all sorts of cryptographic approaches to breaking threshold signatures.
That's awesome. Yeah, because that's where it comes, is actually using with real funds. You can order as much as you want. You can look at as much as you want. Doesn't guarantee there's a vulnerability in it. So good that was found and fixed.
Yeah, this stuff, all this stuff just requires time. I mean, anybody who's built, I see Michael Berkman's on the call here. I mean, anybody who's built a system like Shapeshift or anything like it, all that stuff takes time to bake. It takes time to kind of harden, even older systems. Like, I was talking to a friend of mine who works for a very large exchange. I'm not going to say which one, but he works for a very large exchange, and he found, like, I think 3 critical bones recently, and on an exchange that's been around for a very long period of time, and it's a very well-known exchange, right? Like, so even ones that have been around for a whole long time doesn't necessarily mean that there are no, exploits or vulnerabilities or this kind of stuff. It just means that they're typically harder to find. But you just want to expose and bake as long as you can, as many eyes as you can, to find everything you can possibly find. That's really the intent here.
Awesome. I've got one more point. So there's the proposal for trying BEP2 and Ethereum. I think the from what I got, the first target initiative would be to remove or retire. I call it ERC20 Rune, and I know that the Thor Swap initiative's doing that as well with one of its bonding options. So just talk through that. Why the retirement, and then why is it the case that native Rune is going to be more effective, efficient, and liquid within THORChain as opposed to other types of Rune?
Well, so it all started with BEP2 Rune back in, I think it was June or July of 2019 when it was first launched. And that was done probably mostly because they just wanted to launch an asset and to get investment to fund the initial team and pay salaries and buy infrastructure required, blah, 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 and all these things. And so that was always we kind of thought about never actually having a native asset and just always using BEP2 Rune. That'll just become the thing. That was kind of the thinking for a while. Maybe that might be, but then we just discovered that it really is more beneficial and more efficient for the network to use its own native asset rather than an external BEP2 asset. We didn't want to be dependent upon anything else. Like THORChain's design is designed to have zero dependencies on external assets. Right? We don't have no chain link, right? We don't have no requirement to interact with something outside of itself. We don't have oracles. We don't have any of these things to ensure that its success is reliant on itself and not others, right? If you rely on Chainlink, for example, like Chainlink needs to exist or be around for you to be successful. So you're kind of exposing your risk as a project, like by a multiple, right? Because you require something else to be around to be successful and not be exploited and not have these problems. So anyways, we wanted to get rid of BEP2 for a long time. We knew there was a transitionary asset. And now that THORChain is launched and people can add funds into the pools and they can build nodes and all these kind of things, I think it's the long-term intent is just to retire these things. It just creates confusion for people, like, oh, why are there 3 different runes, and like which one is the rune I want to buy? And okay, I bought the BEP2 rune, but I can't actually do anything with it. I can't swap with it. I can't put it into a pool, and I can't do anything with it. What the hell is the point of this thing? Like, from an outsider's perspective, it's just really weird and confusing and not really kind of collected. And so to all of us who've been in the project for a while, we all kind of understand it and get it, right? But for newcomers coming downstream, that's just going to be overly complex and overly confusing for people. And there's really no need to have it anymore, right? It's like it's already served its purpose and doesn't serve a purpose anymore, to be honest with you. Even if ERC20 Rune was only launched just to kind of prep the Ethereum community for the Rune asset, for the Rune network, because it was going to launch, multi-chain chaosnet in April last year, or this year rather. And so we wanted to like kind of prime the spring in a sense, right? Like get people thinking about Rune and acquiring it and investing into it, and start to learn, the economics and technologies and cryptography that we're using to do this X, Y, and Z, and to kind of help start to build that community within the Ethereum community. That was really the purpose of it. But again, like it was only there for transitionary purposes to help to kind of build a larger community. And so as now that we've actually launched multi-chain KSNet, which will eventually become mainnet, hopefully in the near future, we just don't need those things anymore. And if people are kind of like, sometimes freaking out that, okay, the price of Rune is over here, but the price of BEP2 Rune is over there. And like, it just becomes, a point of contention, a point of concern, a point of distraction, which we just don't need any of that stuff.
Yeah, I think there's two points of going back to BEP2 Rune, is that one, you're reliant on finance that's not as decentralized, and then two is every time a BEP2 movement happens, then that has to go through Bifrost. So you've got a Bifrost or an external chain overhead with the native asset. So it's much easier to have it natively on its own blockchain, because then you don't have to deal with that. You've got you're just dealing with Cosmos at that point. That's how I understand it. Yeah.
But we're not really trying to rush this thing, buddy. We just wanted to float this idea of like, how do we expedite the process of kind of retiring these older assets and moving people off of the BEP2 asset onto the native asset over the coming, months or year or whatever. So, but we're not in a rush to do that. It's not like a fire, that we're trying to put out or anything like that. Or just, we want to start the conversation within the community of the best way to kind of get these transitionary assets off of our back and just be able to move forward with a clean design that's easier for people to understand, especially for newcomers coming into the ecosystem.
All right, cool. What maybe for yourself, Chad, and for I have 2 points or two questions to ask as we start to round this up. So what are you most optimistic for looking forward, perhaps in the next 6 months? Yeah, 6 months. And also, what do you see is the biggest challenge or hurdle moving forward in the next 6 months?
Well, I'll start with the hurdle, and I'll move to the other one. So the biggest hurdle that we're focused on right now at this current moment is the bond, and getting that to scale up. And we've been talking in different ways of approaching this, and there's different like schools of thought that you could think about. And even one of those schools of thought is to do nothing at all. And that's actually a reasonable stance to have. But the only reason why we're even talking about this is only because like the general market's in a pullback, right? Including Rune for that matter. And so because the Rune price is at a relatively low state, the dollar value of the bond is relatively low, right? Obviously, that makes reasonable sense. Like if Rune was at its all-time high, if like to say it's like at $20, then we wouldn't be talking about this at all, because we have just tons in the cap space. Like we'd have so much, free space and to add more assets that it wouldn't be even a concern in anybody's mind. And that's partially because like there tends to be a quadratic relationship that as the Rune price, let's just say the Rune price doubles in value from let's say it goes from $5 to $10 in a thought experiment, the actual pool depth does not increase by 2x. It actually increased by 4x, which is slightly counterintuitive. It starts with 2x because the value of your Rune is the number of Rune you require in the pool is dropped by half. But because of that, the incentive pendulum swings towards the LPers, and they make a lot of money. So that actually creates a lot of pressure, economic pressure, for people to add more liquidity to the network. So the tendency is that you have a quadratic relationship, either in the positive or the negative, depending on the price movement of the Rune asset itself, to actually provide capital. So if Rune was at its $20 price right now, then we probably wouldn't even be having this conversation, and we wouldn't even be concerned about it, because it'd just be totally outside of anything that's important. The only reason we're talking about now is just because the market in general is in a pullback, and we're trying to maintain our growth and keep on pushing forward. And how do we move forward in a way that maintain security, all these kind of things. And that's the only reason why we're talking about these things. That's the thing that I'm probably most concerned about at this moment, is trying to figure out ways to scale up that bond, right? And there's a lot of different ways to do it, and we've been talking about these things publicly for the last couple of weeks now, and we might just go for a multi-pronged attack in a sense, but it's up to the community to decide how they want to go about it, and I'm just here to kind of help educate and inform and make sure everybody has a clear viewpoint before they make a choice. For the thing I'm most excited about, the thing I'm most excited about, I think for me personally, is what we're thinking about in terms of the Thor savings and lending, Thor lending. These two things are super, super, super massive. They are doing something in this space that nobody has done before in a significant way. Not even just the fact that it's cross-chain, like that's pushing that aside for a second. Like that's by itself is a major thing. Being able to do like, Bitcoin lending, for example, like that's ginormous by itself. But to do it in a way where we can have people can invest into an asset and in a way that's single asset exposure, but still make a good amount of yield and a fixed rate interest rate is that's pretty amazing. Nobody's ever done that before. I think the only thing closest to it is a UST's Anchor protocol. But that's like their own asset, and this would work with anybody, any asset. It can be Bitcoin, it can be anything to that matter. And then the lending thing too is really interesting because we're talking about have that be fixed rate interest as well, which means that you don't have to look at the interest rates every day. Make sure you don't get screwed by a sudden jack up in interest rates on your loan. You can just what you're getting into, and you can just it's a very stress free. And I think that's one of the things I'm really excited about is that both of these things are very stress free. They're very simple to understand. There's not a lot of complicated mathematics involved. There's not a lot of complicated variables coming into play. It's just stupid simple. You don't have to understand like multi-asset exposures with impermanent loss. Like all these things just confuse the hell out of people, and rightfully so because it is complex to understand. But just the idea that like, oh hey, I have some Bitcoin and I earn more Bitcoin. There it is. I guess it's literally that fucking like that's stupid, which is brilliant, right? That's exactly what you want. You want something to be that simple and straightforward, and doing that in a way that's just like that is easy for people to understand. I think is a huge shift that I think the community is going to respond very well to. But most of the world, the crypto space, has no idea about this whole Thor savings or Thor lending thing. Like most of them have like no concept of it, and they have no idea that the way we're talking about implementing it is something that's like just so far detached. That challenges a lot of our kind of basic assumptions around lending, for example, that people have always thought like, oh, you need to have 150% collateralization rate. You can't go below that. That doesn't work, right? I'm like, actually, no. There's a way you can do that. It makes complete sense and still secure. Blah blah blah. These things. There actually is a way you can do that, and that's something we've been kind of like hacking on and or kind of playing with wargaming a bit. But that's even a huge thing because now you can actually like effectively you can take a swap from, but it's not really a swap. It's actually it's a loan from a tax perspective. It's a loan and not a swap, but you're doing a swap. It's kind of this really kind of funny thing of like you are swapping, one BTC and you're getting out, whatever the hell whether asset, Ethereum, whatever the hell the asset is, slightly less than one BTC, and you're getting that's a loan. That's a self-paying interest because you're using your liquidity units as your collateral. So that's generating yield for you. It's paying off the loan and it's paying off the interest all on your behalf without you needing to do anything. Now that whole thing, if I understand correctly, and I hope I do, it's completely would be a tax-free event. So you can swap without really causing a taxable event, which I think that's going to be pretty massive for the community.
Oh look, we're not tax advice. Oh, I'm not a tax agent, so not tax advice.
Yeah, not tax advice. I'm not an advisor. I'm just trying to think through, and we're going to talk to other people who do know the stuff better than I do for sure. But all that is my intention is to create it so that you can actually get a loan where you don't have to over collateralize like 150% or 300% or some number which you can't, which some people are kind of force you to do much closer to the not 100%. It's like it's going to be like 101 or 102 or whatever it is, but like so it wouldn't be exactly 100%. And that's perfectly fine, safe, and the network can take on that, that interest, and that, I mean, it's not as big of a deal as people think that it is.
Yeah, I've had a good read up. It looks pretty good, particularly the way that the interest rate's calculated based off the depth of the loan depth on the pool. So someone needs to do a video on it. We'll get. I think go on.
No, I was going to say, hopefully we'll have the complete write up of a proposal for the community to look at the inner workings of how it all works, and get feedback, get thoughts, get advice, comments, blah blah blah, all that stuff. People can challenge our thinking, making sure that we're thinking through everything very tightly, all that kind of stuff. And there's no rush on this too, so the community will have plenty of time to think it over and all that kind of stuff. But hopefully we'll have something out for the community to read, in the next couple weeks or so.
The way I understand it is, synths will come out. There's the synths war game. Then you can do iRune, because iRune is just kind of like built on synths, similar mechanism. Then that includes the savings, because you've got to have the synth vault include, it's kind of part of the synths package, and then iRune you have a vault as well. So there's your saving. Then
I'm
do
not
the
sure
loan.
if we're going to be doing iRune or not. We can and we cannot. I think we need to think more onto it. The thing to be very cautious about with something like iRune is that you want to make sure that all the rune that is being put into the network, is being used in a way that benefits the network. And most of that rune we want to go towards either going into the pools or going to the bond, and not going into some third entity that takes away from those other two. So. And also the other problem with iRune is that it creates sell pressure on the rune asset whenever somebody goes into iRune, which is not beneficial for the value accrual of the rune asset. So even in synthetic rune in general creates sell pressure on rune. And so we don't want to do that. We want to have the opposite, where whenever you mint a synthetic Bitcoin or synthetic Ethereum or synthetic UST or whatever, that always creates buy pressure on the rune asset, which creates more value accrual on that base asset of the network. So we want to make sure we are aligning things in a way that benefits the economics of the rune asset accordingly, and we want to make sure that any rune that we are utilizing in the network in one form or other, that it actually does benefit either the pools or the bond.
But how does it create the sell? Because by minting either iRune or synthetic, you have to acquire rune, mint it. That increases the depth of the pool, which is better for the network overall. So why?
Right, but because when you put in Bitcoin into the pool to mint a synthetic Bitcoin, for example, you're making the pool Bitcoin heavy, which you're going to cost somebody to buy rune to put it into the pool to take out Bitcoin and then sell the Bitcoin for a profit. And if you do the other way around, where you're making the rune a little bit heavy in the pool, a little bit more value in rune, people are going to buy Bitcoin, put it into the pool, and then sell the rune on the other side. That's why.
Interesting.
It's a bit counterintuitive. It almost sounds like in reverse in a sense, but yeah. We always want to make sure that we have the correct value accrual on the rune asset. That's important.
Pros and cons, trade-offs.
But if you want to earn rune on your rune, I think one way to make that easy for everybody is for running bond on nodes, and whether you're a whale with 300,000 rune or more, or you're a smaller shrimp in a sense, and providing bond into a vault node, either one of these two things, like that's still you're gonna earn rune on your rune, right? And if that's what your kind of goal is, you can do that through that mechanism, and then you're also providing security and providing value to the network to be able to have deeper pools and more trade volume and all that kind of stuff.
Sorry, say that again. I lost you there for a sec.
Sorry, I was saying that if you want to earn rune on your rune, I think one way you'll be able to do that is by providing your rune into a bond through a light node or a vault node, and then you can earn. Right now I think it's like 12.5% APY on your rune. And so you can provide that rune and get more rune on your rune, because that's what really iRune is all about. I think for people, I stands for interest rune, and to earn rune on your rune. I think a lot of people in our community obviously want to earn more rune, and so that's partially why people are so excited about it, right? They want to be able to have rune and then be able to produce more rune from it, right? And I think bond is probably the best way of doing that, because it actually does contribute back to the network.
That's cool. I can go all day talking about this. Pluto, I'm sure we'll catch up at a later stage. Pluto, what are you most optimistic for, and what do you see as the biggest challenge? Are you still there? I didn't check. Maybe not.
Yeah, I think we lost Pluto.
All right then.
I mean, if anyone from the audience has a question they want to ask me, go right ahead.
I can't think of a question to speak, so we'll go.
AMA or Q&A.
We've got Marty here, so I just pressed approve, and we'll see what happens.
Do you want me to speak now?
Yeah.
So I've been a rune hodler, but as an old dev and kind of like of late in the last year, like super focused on the Terra system and the Cosmos system more than rune. So forgive me for rune ignorance as I've been studying. When you talked about the Terra assets, okay, and I haven't talked to Sunny about this on the Osmos side of the house, but the AUST, the B Luna, and the Luna X all have basically income with them. You're aware of that?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So no one has really out there in the non-Terra land really figured out how to like bring them into their chain and tap in to that income stream.
Yeah.
So when you talked about, we only want to do Luna and UST first, which is the same thing that Sunny did. Okay, don't get me wrong; it's a great strategy. It would seem to me that Rune might be one of those places where tapping into those revenue streams as a holding asset might be kind of a fantastic thing. Sunny talked about this next phase of the CosmWasm interface being kind of upgraded, and unfortunately, I'm not even sure if you guys even use CosmWasm in these transfers. So, forgive me for bringing this all up. I just wanted to bring that up as a kind of a commentary on the Terra stuff.
Yeah. So the problem with like AUST, as I understand it, and I am not a Terra expert, so you can certainly correct me if I say something wrong here. But the problem with AUST is that the asset gets rebased, if I'm not mistaken. So it's not like a static asset where once you hold it, you hold it. I think because of how they do the payouts of how AUST works, I think. And so because of that, we don't want to hold an asset in our liquidity pools that can be rebased by the original chain or whatever. To be honest, I have to look more into it and read and actually understand AUST more deeply. But there's some hesitation within the core devs around accepting something like one of these income assets because of how the asset is treated. It's different than something like X Sushi, for example. It's different in terms of how it's structured, and so I don't think we can. We do think much more deeply about the implications of having a continuous liquidity pool with an asset that can be rebased and underneath it. The network needs to always have a good understanding of how many of the coins it has. And if I'm not mistaken, please correct me if I'm wrong, I still need to read into myself that it can actually change the amount of assets that it has inside of its system because of the rebasement.
No, that makes sense. I think that's fair. It might be a situation where a partnering with a Mars or a Sater Labs might there might be an asset that could be created that doesn't rebate. I have to think about that one. But again, great conference here, and thank you for letting me speak.
No, thanks for asking the question.
Awesome.
That's a good question. I think for the first round, we'll kind of, as you said, we'll do what Sonny did, Sonny from Osmosis, and just start with UST and Terra. That's the lowest hanging fruit, the most valuable fruit in a sense, and then we can move on to possibly supporting AUSD and other kind of those kind of assets in the future. But we really have to think clearly about these things. They're very different behaviorally than every other asset in the space, and so we have to make sure we're not exposing ourselves to additional risk, or network to additional risk.
All right, cool. We've got about 5 minutes left, so I will see if we get one more question in, and we'll go there. Can, you got a question?
Hi.
Hello.
Hey.
Hello.
How are you guys? So
Good.
Yeah, love to be in this community. I just have a wish or a question, basically. I want to us to switch gears a bit into these vault nodes and light nodes. I know you touched it a bit, but basically, from my point of view, I think these the scalability limits of bonded rune is a top priority in my mind. So Chad mentioned is basically that there are a couple of options here. I just want to have a better understanding of solutions on table right now, and in my brief understanding is that there will be a bunch of nodes which won't participate in consensus, but will provide rune on the bonded side. So I'm curious how these nodes actually provide any security. Just wish to have more color on that.
Sure. Yeah. So the reason why we don't do delegated proof of stake, as you see on Gaia, and I think Terra does it as well, is because we be very concerned about network capture more seriously than most other networks, because we are securing external assets. And that means that in the situation where the network is cyber attacked, which basically means one person acquires enough resources to basically take over the entire network. In most cases, like if it was Atom, for example, or Gaia, who cares? Because the only thing you're tanking is the Atom coin, which is the coin that they use to attack the network anyway, so they're just really going to hurt themselves in that situation. But in THORChain's case, because we're maintaining external assets that don't go to zero if the network is exploited, right? Like Bitcoin's not going to go to zero because THORChain gets exploited, or Ethereum's not going to go to zero because THORChain got cyber attacked or whatever. We have to be very different about how we think about the security of this network, right? So by providing delegated proof of stake on the validator nodes, the ones that are a part of consensus, you create a financial incentive for somebody to cyber attack the network. Just get enough capital, and you convince a bunch of other people who are not you, who are providing all the capital for you on your behalf via a good marketing, scheme or what have you. And so then you're not really providing much capital yourself, but then you attack the network and you steal all the Bitcoin and all the Ethereum and all the Tether and all the other assets, and you walk away a very wealthy individual. So we don't want to do that. That's something we don't want to do. But that's where light nodes comes in, right? So light nodes, how they function is, you can almost think of them like a Yggdrasil vault, right? It's a one-of-one vault, right? It's not multi-sig, it's not a special signature, it's just a regular old wallet that's holding some assets. So you create a light node, and say you put up, $100,000 worth of rune, just throwing out some random numbers here, $100,000 of rune, and then the network will send you $50,000 in Bitcoin and Ethereum and whatever asset. Actually, vault nodes technically it's going to be a single asset, not multiple assets, and there's a reason for that too. But which I'm not going to get into right now. That's getting too much in the weeds. But they'll send you buy $50,000 worth of Bitcoin. Now, if you walk away with that Bitcoin, fine, go right ahead. We have $100,000 of your rune kind of sitting on hand, so we can just go ahead and liquidate you effectively and give your rune to the Bitcoin pool and replenish the $50,000 Bitcoin by arbitration. Everything's fine, nothing's right in the world. The network doesn't lose anything. In fact, the network does well in that case. So the network actually profits. So when you actually steal as a light node and all the funds, and actually the network profits from it because you stole $50,000 and the network takes 1.5x, which is approximately $75,000 from your bond, and then gives it to the pools. And so they're very, very quite happy about it. Actually, they made a bunch of money from that deal, which is good for them. So vault nodes, because you can't be part of consensus, you can't cyber attack. It doesn't matter how much rune you acquire as part of a vault node or a light node. You can have 80% of the circulating supply of rune. It does not matter. You can't capture the network that way because you can never convince the network to send you the Bitcoin or send you the Ethereum or steal all the Bitcoin, Ethereum, Tether, and everything else in that world. That's why it's much more secure to do a light node, and why you can do a sort of delegated proof of stake with vault nodes, because it has no chance of cyber attack, no chance of stealing all the funds together. You never have access to more funds that is not insured from the rune that you're using to bond the network. Now, there's still a problem, though. There's still a problem here. And that is, if I'm running the node and you're going to provide me some of your rune, I could go ahead and steal the $50,000 worth of Bitcoin. I'm only putting up $20,000 of rune myself, and you put up the other $80,000. So together we have $80,000, $100,000. So you got 80, I got 20. And we got $50,000 of the Bitcoin. I walk away with $50,000 of Bitcoin because I'm running a node. I lost $20,000, but I gained $50,000. So I'm up $30,000 in Bitcoin. I'm a happy customer, right? I just profited from the scenario. But shit, you got slashed, fuck ton because of it. So you just lost a bunch of money yourself. So that sucks for you, right? Again, the network's fine in this scenario. The network actually profits from a situation. So the network's actually in a good place. But you and I are in a bad place because now you're pissed at me because I stole all this money and at your cost and blah, 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 this kind of thing. So there's still that risk, right, of being rug pulled by whoever the person is that you are entrusting to run their node for you, that they're not going to run away and steal all the funds. That's why we kind of talk about, having a KYC thing of, if you want to provide rune to bond to a light node, you should know who that person is. It shouldn't be some anon person that you never, that you have some sort of telegram address to or something like this. You should actually know who they are. You should actually sign a contract with this person. They should be, it should be Bison Trails, or it should be Nine Realms, or a Block Daemon, or like one of these kind of companies that actually, are legitimate businesses that have CEOs, CTOs, the legal entities that you're signing a contract with. And, if they do steal, then, you can sue them in court and all these kind of things, these kind of procedures you can take place. Does that make sense? Did that answer your general question?
It was definitely super helpful. I just didn't fully understand the rug pull scenario. In this scenario, I provide some rune, and the bonder doesn't give me the Bitcoin. Is that it? Was that it?
Oh, sorry. Can you say it again?
Like all the things you said was very helpful. I just didn't understand fully the rug pull scenario.
Yeah.
How does that actually work again?
Yeah. So here's how the rug pull scenario works. I'm running a vault node, right? I'm providing infrastructure. I'm providing the technical skill sets. I know how to run a light node, so yay on me. And I convince you to give me a bunch of rune to bond into my light node, right? And let's just say that I put up, $10,000 worth of rune in bonding to this node, and you put in, $90,000 worth of rune, right? So there's kind of an uneven system here between you and I. The network will then, because you have $100,000 worth of rune bonded for this node, the network will now give me approximately $50,000 of Bitcoin or Ethereum or some asset, doesn't matter which one. So it gives you about $50,000 worth of that asset. So my node that I'm running literally has $50,000 sitting on it in its wallet that's running on that server, right? And so if I want to be malicious, I want to be, an asshole, I could go ahead into my own server, and I can get the private key, and I can send the Bitcoin to my BC1 address and walk away with all that $50,000 of Bitcoin. Now, when that happens, the network will observe that I just stole the Bitcoin because I saw the transaction go out. It wasn't a whitelisted transaction, right? And so the network says, oh shit, this guy just sent out the Bitcoin to a BC1 address that was not authorized. So this is considered to be theft. This is going to be stolen. So the network says, okay, he just stole $50,000 worth of Bitcoin. Let's slash his bond 1.5x. That's $75,000 of Rune. It basically gets dumped back into the Bitcoin pool to replenish the value of the BTC that was stolen. And so I walked away from $50,000. I may have burned my $10,000 worth of Rune as well, but I'm still walking around walking away with a $40,000 profit, right? But you just got screwed, man. You just lost, $65,000 of your bond, and you have no Bitcoin to, show for it. So you just, you got rug pulled. I just rug pulled you. I stole all the assets underneath it in the vault and walked away, a wealthier man because of it. And so because of that, you have to be very concerned about, or very considerate of who, if you're going to be trusting somebody else to run a node for you, you have to trust that person. You have to know who they are. You have to shake their hand in a matter of speaking, and making sure that they're, on the up and up. They're not going to rug pull you. Because if they do rug pull you, then the network can't do anything for you. It's already happened. The network's not going to, try to mitigate these kind of scenarios. That becomes on you to talk to that person, to, knock on their door, to, file a claim with a legal lawsuit possibly, or I don't know what the actual process would be. That's on your shoulders to figure that out.
Okay, that's very clear. And maybe one last question could be, why do we consider the delegation scenario here in the light nodes case and not in the normal bonders case?
Yes. So in the normal bonders case, with delegation, I can effectively, let's say that the network in total has $500 million of Bitcoin, Ethereum, like all the pools combined of the non-Rune assets, the Bitcoin, the Ethereum, the Tether, the UST, the Luna, like all these things. Let's just say it combines to be $500 million. Let's just say for argument's sake here, right? In order to Cybele attack or have access to enough TSS shares or to the actual chain itself to be able to attack it, I need to have 2/3 majority of the nodes, right? And in order to have 2/3 majority of the nodes, I need X amount of Rune, which is going to be $1 billion worth of Rune, right? Now I don't really have $1 billion of Rune, right? And so I might convince, I might put up 100,000 or something like this, or some number that I may have, but then I might convince you to provide me some Rune, and your friend John, and your friend Jacob, and your friend Jessica, and and start a marketing campaign and Twitter campaign and telling everybody in the world oh, you should bond up with my node, blah blah blah, because of whatever. I convince people to do it. So eventually, I get to the place where I collect enough Rune that I'm actually capable of running enough nodes where I can then have access to the entire network. I can actually deploy a new version of the chain and universally do it on my own because I have 2/3 majority of the nodes. So I can go ahead and I can make any changes in the network that I choose, including just sending myself all the funds. That's bad, right? That's a bad situation. That's why doing delegated proof of stake on the validators is problematic, because it always exposes you to economic insecurity. But with vault nodes, it doesn't matter, because you can't actually cause a change, and you don't have access to TSS. You don't have access to the validator nodes, the actual nodes of the chain. You don't have access to any of those things. So it doesn't matter how much Rune you collect. You could collect $10 billion of the Rune. It doesn't matter. You will never have enough asset to be able to make and to institute any kind of change whatsoever. You can't access the Uniswap funds. You can't access the Asgard funds. You can't access any of these things. And so that's why you don't have to worry about being attacked, is because you'll never have access to be able to make a change to the network to be able to steal all the funds.
Last question, and then I'll leave. And thank you for that and taking your time. This seems like a very viable solution. I just wonder, what are the challenges now ahead of you for the community basically to implement this? And yeah. make
for
this a reality.
For vault nodes or light nodes.
Yeah, for vault nodes. Yes.
Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah, so that's already started. The work around this has already been started by Iridanis from Nine Realms has been working on this, and I've been helping him along as an advisor on this particular code change. It's a large code change. It takes a lot of changes to be made. All of it has to be validated, tested, all these kind of things. It's been kind of pushed to the back burner a little bit as Iridanis has kind of refocused attention onto, I think it's StageNet or something else. So it's kind of been pushed in the back. But then there's always kind of the discussion of okay, do we still need vault nodes if we have, the ability for multiple people to provide bond into a validator? But that requires KYC. So that there's kind of a discussion or a debate within the community, within the core devs, and these kind of things of what is the correct thing here. I actually personally think I still lean towards the vault nodes. It's a lot more work and it's a lot more technically challenging because you're instituting an entire new kind of type of vault and management of that, and a lot more code to write and this kind of stuff. But it is the more correct design, at least from my perspective. It's a safer approach. Going with a pooled validator where multiple bonders are providing to a validator in a KYC fashion, in a non-delegate proof of stake, but KYC fashioned, that's not as worried about cyber attack in that scenario because you just can't get, you have to whitelist everybody by hand, and so you can't just get a bunch of people to provide capital all at once. It's just not practical to cyber attack in that situation. And that's a lower hanging fruit to do. I mean, I've actually already wrote the code to make that change. I actually have a PR open right now. Which the community can debate whether or not they want to merge it or don't merge it. It's up to the community to decide those things. But in order to do that, we still need to do another change, which is something Iridanis is working on around payment or rewards for node operators to be relative to bond size rather than relative to node count. And that's a different kind of mechanism of how we pay, how we calculate the ROI for different node operators. And you can't really do what we're talking about for vault nodes or pooled validators without having a payout that's relative to the bond size. You kind of need that there. Otherwise, it wouldn't make any sense. Like if I have a validator and I'm getting paid out by number of nodes, I have one validator, I make, let's say 6,000 rune a month, which is about correct. If I take on your bond, and I have to pay you out, 20% because you provide 20%, I provide 80% or something of this nature. I have to pay you 20%. I'm actually just paying you out for nothing. Like I could just keep the full 6,000 myself and then walk away a wealthier man, or I could take your 20%, and make slightly less than 6,000 rune per month. So it makes no economic sense, really. For me to kind of work with you and take your rune into my node. The only way it makes sense is that the node payout is relative to bond size. And then on top of that, there's a node operator fee where I charge you, 10% or 5% or 20%, whatever I choose for my own node of an operator fee for providing the infrastructure on your behalf, just to make it profitable for me. So I can run my own node. I get paid, $6,000, 6,000 rune rather, per month, and then I take your rune as well, and I'm getting additional, 500 rune a month from that as well. Okay, there's no skin off my teeth. It doesn't take any more time or pressure or work on my behalf, really, and I can earn more profit from my node. Makes sense to me, right? So that's kind of the intent, at least, of this notion. So there's really almost like a choo-choo train, of different things that need to come into play before you even get to the whole vault node thing, in a sense.
Yep, thank you. Very insightful.
Yeah, no worries. Any other questions?
I'm good.
Anyone have any other questions before we close it up? I do have one, Chaz. So a lot of people that have rune holdings have thought about running a node. If someone's fairly new, I've still got my node series out there. I was thinking of doing one, just walking through the docs so people can understand what it's all about, try and demystify it a bit. Obviously, there are risks. It's not just something you can just ape into and try and get some good APY for no risk. So what's your thoughts around somebody to say, okay, look, I've got $1 million worth of spare Rune, and now I might think about being a node operator to lift the total bond. What thinking should be applied to that to not to undersell how simple it is?
Well, we've actually made it very simple. That's actually a problem, to be honest with you, because like the actual process to build and deploy a node, we've abstracted away through Terraform scripts, through Kubernetes configuration, Helm charts, all these things, so that it's actually like you can literally do it with like a few commands. It's really dumb simple, which becomes actually a problem because we've made it so easy for people to run a node that if something goes wrong, right? If there's a problem, like one of the PVCs goes offline, or you can't, you need to scale up the disk from 300 gigabytes to 600 gigabytes to fit the Binance chain, blah, blah, whatever. Like, if you don't know Kubernetes and you don't know Helm charts, you don't know how to use all these, like, you don't know Linux commands and these things, then you've just really kind of put yourself into a kind of a bad position because you don't really know what you're doing. So if something breaks, like, you don't have the foundation to fix it. So we actually made it shockingly easy to run a node, but it does require technical skill sets for sure. There are risks involved. Probably the biggest risk is you need to make sure that your node is secure and that doesn't have any open ports or any way for a malicious actor to kind of get into your node, a 0-day kind of rootkit your node and get into some kind of backdoor and execute some arbitrary code on your box. You don't want that, obviously. We've done this in a way where we built a standard configuration in a way, and this is a big debate. Actually, my friend, who I think is actually in the room as he was earlier, we debated about whether or not this was a good idea or not, because if you have it so that everybody's in the same standard configuration, then if there's a problem, then everybody has the problem, and you've just exposed everybody's node, right? That's the negative. But the con is, the pro is that everybody's in the same standard configuration. That configuration has been more hardened, it's been more studied, it's been more correctly designed than having each individual person design their own system, which is more likely to, at least in my view, to have some sort of firewall issue or what have you. So the most important thing is that you make your node so it's not it can't be exploited in a way that steals all the funds out of the Yggdrasil. If that happens, you lost a lot of money. So don't do that. That would be really, really bad. But that's really like probably the most significant risk of running a node. Everything else is pretty straightforward. There are some growing pains, some bugs that the network needs to work out of, like slashing people inappropriately when they didn't do anything wrong, but the network had some edge case scenario where it double signed a transaction or something like this. That's less true today. That's more true in the earlier days. And as time goes on, we're going to make things more, resilient in this sense. But it's relatively low risk, relatively speaking, and it's pretty consistent income as well, which is really, really nice. Whereas being an LP in a pool is a little bit different in the sense that the risk is a permanent loss and the network being exploited and all these kind of things. You have less risk for a node operator than you do as an LP, to be honest with you.
Well, that's good. That's good. I think some knowledge, like you said, some knowledge is good, because you don't want to be like being an active node operator and then doing a make destroy tools on your command. That'd be pretty bad.
So people have done this, right?
No, no.
So for people who don't know, so there's a thing in Linux called make, M-A-K-E, and it's basically a way. It's like a shortcut, right? It's kind of like it's conceptually like a convenience button on your remote control that takes you directly to Netflix, right? But it's just like make Netflix, and it's like, and it does something can be somewhat complex, but this makes it so much easy. It's makes it really easy to kind of implement, right? Because you just make Netflix, whatever, and it launches Netflix. Like it's conceptually somewhat similar. And so, but you have to be careful about doing this, because if you do like make destroy, right, you probably don't want to do that, because if you destroy everything, you're going to destroy the funds potentially as well, right? You'll burn your private key forever. So, and there has been people who have done this. Like there was a guy who he decided to not run the standard configuration of a Thor node, and he ran his own thing, and he had his own setup and all this kind of stuff. And then he his disk drive, the way he had things like using a disk software that basically replicates data across 2 different disks. And that thing was just completely hosed. Like he did something, I don't even know what he did, honestly, but somehow he completely hosed it and destroyed like all the data, which was, obviously not good, which included the private key. Oh, and so that was a big pain in the butt, and we tried our best to help him out as much as we could. But like there has been happened where people actually like did make something, and not thinking. People used to like a make install like the testnet environment onto a mainnet like node, right? Like that's So like we and over time we've made things harder and harder to fuck it up, right? To make these commands more idiot proof. And then, as they always say, like you make something idiot proof, the universe will just produce a bigger idiot, which is kind of true. But we've made things harder and harder and harder to fuck them up. But you still you can do a lot of damage if you don't know what you're doing. So you be very careful about how you're interacting with that system, and and that's the problem with these like make commands, is that like it abstracts away what's actually happening, and so you don't really know what you're doing when you execute. You're like, oh, make Netflix, right? You're telling it to do something, but you don't really know how that's actually happening underneath it all, right? And it's better that you do, right? It's better that you actually have an understanding. It's almost like if you were driving a car and you had it on an autopilot, but with cruise control, right? Like you abstract away the idea of hitting the gas and hitting the brake, but you probably should have an understanding of how that works, just in case the cruise control turns off for some reason. You don't want to be like, oh shit, what's a gas pedal? What's a brake pedal? Like in the car is moving, right? Like you don't want to do that. Like so even though we make it easy for you to do make Netflix or whatever, so that you don't have to hit the gas pedal, the brake pedal, metaphorically speaking, it's best that you actually do. So in case something happens, you're like, oh, I know what's happening here. I can do this and hit the gas pedal, and the car goes, hit the brake pedal. I can stop the car safely, right? You don't need to actually understand how an engine works, or how pistons work, or how a spark plug works per se. You don't have to go too deep into the weeds, which you can get infinitesimally into the weeds if you really want to be privy to that. But you should have an understanding of how to turn a wheel, how to hit the brake pedal and the gas pedal. Like you should have that basic understanding. You don't necessarily need to understand the internals of an engine, but you should have an understanding of how to operate the car itself, rather than relying it to be on autopilot the whole fucking time.
That's right. These makes can call a bunch of scripts underneath that do all the commands, so that way you don't have to worry about it.
Everything is cleverly scripted in a way. It's very cleanly written. All that code's actually written. People can read the source code and understand what's happening underneath it all. If they want to understand what's happening when you do a make update, or a make destroy, or a make install, or a make deploy tools, or how the command is. You can read those scripts and understand what's being executed, and then read into those commands and what are those commands doing, and kind of go down the rabbit hole in a matter of speaking. And I would encourage people to do that at some point. If you're running a node, if you're running a node, you really have millions of dollars worth of Rune on a box. And so you should take that shit seriously. You should take that as if it's a full-time job, because you're literally making the income. You're making like 6,400 Rune a month right now running a node. So like, that's a full-time job right there, right? That's a lot of money that you're making. So you should take it seriously and actually understand everything. And so I always encourage people to do that if they're running a node.
That's pretty good. I remember when Single Chain Castnet was launched, someone had put 2 nodes under the same admin computer. So they had, got their Linux terminal done a make castnet validator and then a make testnet validator, 2 different node deployments, and then they didn't update their Kubernetes configuration to point to the different one. So they destroyed their they think they are destroying their testnet when they're destroying the castnet one, and they're like, "Oh, whoops, my bad." So
that's
lots of traps.
Do that. That's bad. That's really a bad thing. You don't want to do that. But again, like, we've put some new kind of safeguards on the system so that it makes it harder to do that. You know,
the docs clearly say don't do that. The docs clearly say don't do that.
Like, but you have to assume that people aren't reading the docs, because people don't read docs, right? And so, like, now when you do like a make command that has some sort of impactful change, it actually will prompt you now. It will say like, hey, you're like destroying this on, you know, this mainnet node, blah, blah, blah. Like, it makes it in a way that forces you to at least hit the prompt and say, yes, I approve. Let's destroy my mainnet thing. At least it has that prompt now, so you don't accidentally do that.
Yeah.
Which, by the
that's
way,
good.
Kind of comedically, that's exactly what happened to Amazon. This is like 7 years ago. Like, Amazon was like down for like a day and a half because some DevOps engineer hit fat fingered a command to like to destroy something, and he selected the wrong thing. And because there wasn't a command, like a prompt saying yes or no, like, are you sure you want to do this? So he destroyed an entire like data center in a heartbeat. And the whole like AWS was like down for like, I think, a day and a half or 2 days, something like this, all because there wasn't a prompt for that guy to like, are you sure you want to destroy the entire environment of this? There was no prompt for that. And it's like, yeah, there should always be prompts when it comes to something as harmful as permanent destruction.
Awesome. Yeah, they should. So I think more node operators is a good thing, but they're just, and that can immediately increase the caps, but that does require risk and understanding before entering that. It's not like a light, from my perspective, it's just not like a light decision.
No, it's not a light decision. People should take that seriously and not do it as like, it's not the same as like running like a Bitcoin node, right? No, Bitcoin node is very, very simple to do, and it doesn't matter. You can literally lose hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars if you get it wrong. So you should think of it within that context. That should be, I always kind of try to push people in this regard, which is why we're kind of exploring the idea of like being able to provide bond to a node operator that, you know, is, you know, I've had people talk to me in the past like, hey, I'm a big, you know, holder of Rune. I got a lot of Rune. I'd love to run a node, but I have no technical skills. Like, should I like just kind of like read about it and run a node? I'm just like, not so sure. Like, I've always said, even in the early days, I said, like, if you've never used PagerDuty yourself in your life, then you probably should not be running a node. Meaning that you've never professionally run infrastructure for a service in your life. And so by being able to create an easy mechanism for the community to be able to provide room without requiring the technical skill sets, kind of opens up for a lot more people to participate in running a node than do today. And that, to me, that pushes us further down the line of decentralization, right?
Look, to be fair, I never knew what PagerDuty was, but I did understand Docker and Linux, like containerization and stuff like that. So
so I say because PagerDuty is basically like an on-call system that, like, if the network breaks or a server goes down or something happens, there are a full-time staff of individuals, typically system engineering, DevOps staff, who receive text messages, push notifications, literally phone calls from an automated system that says, "Hey, this data center is down, or this server is down, or this network interface is offline," or blah, blah, like whatever it might be. So I've literally run that professional infrastructure for companies like Brightcove and for Cloudant and RStudio, other companies as well. And I've literally like been paged at 2:30 in the morning. I had to get my ass out of bed to fix some server that went down or something that broke in whatever company that I'm working for at the time. And so like that means that I've had enough experience running in like high availability, high performance network infrastructure that takes hundreds of millions of transactions or requests in a day or so. And so like that's something where I kind of encourage more of those types of people to run nodes because they're just better at it. They understand what they're doing. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't learn Kubernetes, you can't learn Helm charts, you can't learn Linux commands, all these things. If you're really kind of privy to it, and you want to do it, like, just spend the time, educate yourself, learn, read.
Chad, you remember when the Log4j vulnerability came out? How we were like literally sitting there going through every individual Helm deployment and looking at the image and then looking up the source code of the image and seeing if every single image had any JVM exposure whatsoever. That's kind of like the level of scrutiny that you need to look at this infrastructure at. You can run a make install command, but if you have no idea what you're installing, you have no idea what you're vulnerable to. And so while it's good, right now, I think we should encourage more people to become node operators. We should strive to an end state where every node operator is covered by or is themselves a world-class infrastructure and security expert. Because that's what it's going to take to really secure THORChain. After we're sure that the protocol itself is secure, all eyes turn to infrastructure. So right now, people are looking at how can I poon THORChain the protocol. Once the protocol is battle tested and secure, people and attackers will turn their attention to, well, how can I just poon this node operator? And so while right now we are as a team here to help you, if something happens, if your bond gets slashed for something, we'll refund you if it ends up being, due to a bug in the code. But that won't always be in place. You're not always going to get refunded whenever you get slashed. You're not going to get refunded if somebody hacks into your node and poons your entire box. So eventually people have to have a lot of skills. And so what I'm telling people is if you have no skills whatsoever right now and you just want to run a node and earn yield on your rune, there's better ways to do that. You can either pool it with 9 realms, or we can ship a feature like pooled validators, and you can just pool to someone else's validator. We should build things in the protocol that allow non-skilled people to add rune and bond to the network. That's an absolute given. But in terms of and also that likewise, we've had even people within the ecosystem come to us and ask us other projects that have a bunch of rune to run nodes for them. And that's one of the times that we would, actually recommend, well, you're an operator or you're an owner of this ecosystem and you have a ton of rune. So it actually might be in your best interest to learn more about how THORnode works and how infrastructure works. So it might make sense for you to invest in the time and energy to run a node, because ultimately it will make you a better participant in this network. But for people that just have no skill whatsoever, they should just, bond it to somebody else who knows what they're doing, and that person should just take a fee of it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. That Log4j thing is a really good example because, I'm not going to be in this project forever. I plan on leaving at some point, and so that I can pursue other things that I really want to build. Maybe Pluto, you're not going to be around forever as well. So the next time we have a Log4j scenario, then really the node operators collectively should be working together and say, oh, hey, there's a new exploit and a very commonly used Java library, and we need to figure out what our exposure is and if our servers are safe from this exploit, and and collectively move together to figure out if there's any problem, right? And there ended up not being a significant problem in our case and for this particular time, but that may not be true, in 6 months if there's another kind of problem with some other library, some Golang library, for example, that has some sort of exploit in it, right? So I would love the node operators to get away from leaning on a few choice individuals, like myself or Pluto, for example, to have all the weight and expectations of us to maintain all things. I think that's okay in the beginning and just to set a standard and this kind of thing. But I would hope that more node operators kind of take on more of a role within the community to contribute, and not rely on me or Pluto to do, to look into a particular exploit or maybe even solve a slashing bug that slashes inappropriately. Maybe somebody else in the community can figure out, oh, why was there node slash and what changes can we make to the protocol to make this edge case, not so problematic, right? And so rather than relying on me or Heimdall or Pluto or one of these kind of key players.
Cool. Hey, I'm gonna have to go soon. So, but I did want to ask Pluto, whilst he's on, what are you most optimistic for in the next 6 months, and what do you see as the biggest challenge going forward for the next 6 months? And Chad's already talked about the bond being a challenge, so I want to see if you can think of something else.
Yeah, I think just like even just from the discussion we had earlier, like security around new chains. But also one thing that I'm really interested in is trying to shard Bifrost, because right now, like when we do churns, the entire network has to churn together. So every vault, all the assets have to move together in one sort of coordinated churn symphony, and every node has to participate in that at the same time, or else churns fail. And what I would like to do in the future is potentially see if there's a way to make it just a little bit more resilient to other chains having issues, right? So if one of these chains that is like a proof of stake network, or maybe even like a more centralized type chain, if there's any issues with any of the chains in THORChain trying to churn, meaning like blocks stop getting produced or whatever, all of THORChain will kind of grind to a halt. And so while we've only integrated like the best chains with the highest uptime so far, we are only as strong as our weakest link right now. And so one of the things I would like to see is actually to kind of re-architect the vaults to be a bit more independent. And that would also help from a security perspective, just to make sure that like, I don't know, just you're like each chain, each Bifrost client is like participating in its own TSS ceremony to move its own funds across its own chains. Like it kind of just makes sense from an architecture perspective. But we'll see what the challenges there lie. But for me, it's going to be mostly about adding new chains and making sure that those chains are resilient and that they don't adversely impact the performance of THORChain as a whole. Those are the things I'm most excited about, and also most concerned about simultaneously.
All right, awesome. Well, so I got to go. It's Christmas Eve here, and I've got to do cooking tomorrow, so I've got to do more prep. So unless someone wants to host or continue on, I am going to leave the chat. Thanks very much for everyone that joined and participated. But if Chad and Pluto want to keep going, you're more than welcome. It's up to you. What I'll do is add Morgan, and then after that, because I've got some requests to speak, if you want, Morgan ask a question, and then that'll be it.
Great. Thanks for putting this together, Chris, and thanks for that fantastic dev update you put out recently. If anyone hasn't read that, go check it out. I think it's a really good synopsis of where we were at, where we've come, where we are now, and where we're going.
Well, thanks. That's a team effort. I got to say. So I think clarity around the communication about what we're doing, crystallizing our path forward, and then delivering on that. Obviously, delivery is probably the key thing that matters in crypto. I think it's really important. So that's something that I really like. And then going ahead and then actually delivering on that, having that transparency throughout. So I'm looking forward to the delivery of what's on that roadmap as well. So getting Luna, getting all that type of stuff delivered, and then paving the way for the synthetics next year. So I'm really excited.
Thanks for hosting and asking me all those questions and mediating the whole thing, and for putting up with a 2-hour-long extravaganza here. And anybody in the audience that's sitting around for 2 hours listening to me yammer on about horse shit, good props on you for just listening to me just go on for hours about stuff.
Chad, the more I listen, the more excited I get. So I'm sure I could pick your brain for quite some time. We'll have to do it again. Yeah,
absolutely.
One of the more recent videos, someone put it in a comment. They wanted to see me do a video with yourself or something like that. It's quite funny.
Hey, man, I'm down.
All right, cool. All right, I think Morgan's got the last speaker, but I'm going to drop off now. Thanks, everyone.
Nice one.
Yep.
Thanks a million.
How you doing, Morgan?
Yeah, good, great. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for doing this, and amazing to see the work the devs have put in, especially over the last year, and looking forward to next year. This is a question maybe more on the like comms marketing side, but curious to hear your thoughts about approaching. Well, for context, there's a proposal up on SushiSwap to do a reorganization of the DAO there. And one of the more interesting ones is Daniel Sesta from Cadabra and a few other protocols he owns or has built. Is might be taking over the lead as like a chief strategist, and so curious because in his protocol, or sorry, in his proposal, he'd mentioned about turning Sushi into a cross-chain. I'm so curious to hear your thoughts on if it's worth publicly courting Daniela and the Sushi folks about an integration with THORChain in Q1 Q2 next year possibly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think this is one of the areas I'm very excited about THORChain getting involved with, is just like it becoming kind of this transparent thing that you don't even know is there, right? And like Shapeshift is probably the first and prominent example of that, of just like you're interacting with Shapeshift, you're swapping, you're trading, but in the background, what's actually happening is they're doing swaps on THORChain to fulfill whatever transaction you want to do. And so people are using THORChain who have no idea they're using THORChain, right? And I think Sushi would be another kind of good example of this. Is you can swap Ethereum or USDT to Bitcoin or something like this, and what's actually happening is just kind of redirecting that transaction to THORChain, and then it sends the Bitcoin to the BC1 address of your choice, all this kind of stuff. There's still some work that needs to be done around the ETH router, because the ETH router is there's not a static address that you can send your funds to. It's like mostly static, but not entirely static. Like if we never upgrade the router again, then that's the address, and it'll never change. But we might want to change it at some point by I want to add a feature at some point, possibly in the future. So we need to figure out a way, which is a totally solvable problem, but to create a single address that people can swap to that goes to whatever the correct ETH address. So we might need to put like a wrapper around the ETH router to support something like this. But that's totally a solvable problem, and like not something I'm actually all that like worried about. I think that's a relatively somewhat easy problem to solve. So I would totally encourage Sushi or Uni or any of these characters, these projects to consider going cross chain, and the only option for them, honestly, is THORChain, because THORChain is the only one that actually supports the most important asset, which is obviously Bitcoin, being the biggest behemoth in a sense. Like getting us rid of people using these kind of BDC wrapped assets like REM BDC or WBDC or these kind of things is like something we should all be striving for in the industry. Whether you're an ETH maxi or a Bitcoin maxi, like get rid of these things. These things are like they're completely unnecessary, and they just add more risk to the system, which we don't really want to do. So yeah, absolutely. Sushi, I mean, and the team could totally reach out to me or other people, other core devs, and have that conversation. So I'll be super excited to get that integration going. I think it was talked about before, like a while back. I think 0x Maki talked about integrating with THORChain like 6 months ago or 9 months ago, something like this. There was definitely talk about it, and I think there was a proposal that was put up and was debated in the community. But hopefully they can revisit it and take it more seriously this time and actually implement it. Like that I'd be totally down for that, for sure.
Sick, nice one. Thanks for that.
Yeah, no worries. I'm not sure if there's anybody else who wants to ask a question or not, or what.
I think the hosts have left, so I think we're gonna just wrap it here.
All right, sounds good to me. Thanks everybody for sitting through a 2 hour long chat. Hopefully it was fun and educational, and people learned a few things.
Awesome. Thanks for keeping it going, Chad.
Yep.
Take care.
All right. Bye, guys.